Hello everybody, I am PhenomSage, and welcome back to another Made in Abyss chapter review. Today we are going to be talking about chapter 28, Entrance to the 6th Layer. Now, before we get into what happened in this slightly slower, more brief respite kind of chapter, not really action-packed like it was last chapter, I did want to clarify a few things, make a few notes before we move on to what actually happened. First of all, I had some few complaints about the translation last chapter, and a lot of you told me to start reading on Batoto or Batoto or whatever it's pronounced or called. I looked into it, and the translations on that site are the exact same as where I'm reading, except where I'm reading I can read it in like one full page, like just keep scrolling down. So I'm going to keep reading it on the site that I'm using, but rest assured, every single chapter I'll make sure that I'm getting the same translation that's on there and make sure that I'm not getting any kind of sketchy or weird translation. Although, from what I've been told and a few clarifications that were made, the translation last chapter was actually good. There was nothing really wrong with it. Even the everlasting hammer stuff, that's something to do with kanji, not really the translation team's fault, so I'm fine with this translation. I just saw some sketchy things. I was like, oh no, is this a weird translation? But it's fine, it's fine. Now let's get into corrections. I feel like I need to do this for all of my series, where I mention corrections given to me on something that I said or something that I speculated, because I feel like I'm always getting stuff wrong when I'm reviewing things, so I want to try and mention these corrections in the next review whenever possible, just because I don't want to go around spreading false information or something. For one, I was a bit confused with the naming of the insects that attacked everybody last chapter in the field of the Eternal Fortunes. The praying hand referred to them as Imegos and Kuangatoris, and I was confused on which is which. Is Kuangatori its name, or is it Imego, or what? And a lot of you told me that Imego is actually the name for the final and fully developed adult stage of an insect. So when he was referring to them as Imegos, he was saying that they are in their final stage of metamorphosis and they're just everywhere across the field of Eternal Fortunes. So that makes a lot of sense. I am not biologically knowledgeable at all, so thank you guys for telling me that, and I'm glad that's all cleared up now. And one other correction that I want to make, I called them the praying hands this time. You'll notice that last chapter review, I switched from praying hands to umber hands because that's what the translation did, but a lot of you said that praying hands actually makes a lot more sense and gave different reasonings for it, but the one that I like the most is that the praying hands is in reference to Bondrud's white whistle, which looks like two hands praying or closed together. So I like that explanation. That's what I'm going to be calling them from now on. And thank you guys for giving your input on that, because I probably would have kept calling them umber hands if you guys hadn't said anything. One last thing I'd like to mention, it's not a correction, but last chapter review, I did promise somebody that I would be checking out and reviewing the two special chapters that I had not covered on this channel. I covered the Kiwi one already when we were doing the episode review, but I have not talked about the other two special chapters, and I said I would do it this chapter review, but I ran out of time and unfortunately could not do that, so I apologize to that person. I will try to do it next week, so if you can hang in there a little bit longer, I'll talk about those two special chapters next week. Look forward to that. And without further ado, with all that out of the way, let's get into this chapter. Now, as I said, this was a slower chapter. We spent a lot of time sitting around eating and just talking to each other. It was more of a lighthearted, wholesome interaction than we've gotten from this group in a long time, and technically with Nanachi here, I'd say ever. This is the most heartwarming group interaction we've ever had with them, other than maybe like the Springs maybe, but this was definitely a slower chapter for sure, but it gave some really well needed and appreciated development and more dynamic between this group, which I will go over later on. But the big thing to this chapter is that we are finally in the 5th layer. We are in unknown territory at this point. It feels like we were on that 4th layer for a really long time, so it's awesome to see this 5th layer in action, and my god, it's gorgeous. I mentioned this in the reaction, and I should probably mention, I didn't mention this already, but there is a reaction in the description, so feel free to click on that if you want my first-hand reaction to the chapter. Scrolling through, That's where you'll get my more in-depth analysis on everything that happened in the chapter. This is more so just focusing on smaller pieces and giving my elaborated thoughts on those things. Anyways, in the reaction, I had a huge reaction to some of this artwork in this chapter. It is fucking gorgeous. It is so damn good. Just seeing the 5th layer for the first time, seeing that vast sea stretching across the abyss, seeing the waterfalls cascade together, it is just so beautiful. Akihito is a master at artwork. The shading, the way things blend together, it's so beautiful. I've been waiting to see this layer for a long time because, in my opinion, it was the one that looked the most visually interesting on the map when I saw it, other than maybe the city in the 6th layer. So I'm so glad we're here. We're finally seeing this place in action, and we're seeing this base at the bottom. I'll talk about that later too, but that looks equally as incredible. And somewhere along the way of traversing this 5th layer, we take a break. Nanachi, Riko, and Reg take a break. Reg goes out to get a fish from this sea. He dives into the sea, which was pretty reckless because this is the 5th layer. There's probably insanely dangerous creatures in this 5th layer in the sea, but he comes back with a fish. It's lunchtime or dinner time or whatever, and this is where the bulk of the chapter takes place, with this meal between everybody. There's some funny moments, there's some very heartfelt moments, and while it was slower, I really enjoyed seeing these characters interact with each other. Also, I have to say, forget the gorgeous artwork in this chapter. This mealtime scene has one of the best 4 panels I've ever seen in a manga. I'm not gonna say anything else about it, but just look for yourself. It's incredible. There's a beautiful scene after the meal where Nanachi and Reg are just sitting down, staring at the sea, and Nanachi reflects on her time back with Midi and how Midi and them had never eaten any good food at all. It was always tasteless, just bland, very bad food. And that's why she wants to learn to make good food from Riko, so that the next time she meets Midi, she can make her good food. And of course, she's talking from the heart, so she says, I don't really expect to meet Midi again, but that's where I'm coming from when I want to learn to make good food. And Riko just pops out of nowhere and says, it's not impossible. We are going to meet Midi again. We are going to learn the secrets of the abyss. We're going to learn about the curse. It all lies at the bottom. It's too early to give up. And Nanachi's just kind of dumbfounded. She's like, you know nobody's been to the bottom of the abyss, right? You really sound confident for somebody who almost got killed on the 4th layer. And Riko just is unwavered. She says, we're going to make it. It's Reg's home. We are going to make it to the bottom. And I love this interaction between them so much. For a while, it seemed like it was only Reg and Nanachi that were getting that development and that focus, and Riko was kind of just left to the sidelines. That's where all the development occurred, was between Reg and Nanachi. But now we're finally getting some Riko development with the rest of the group as well. I mean, we have the Riko and Reg development already, but now we're getting Riko and Nanachi as well. And this is one of the first instances that I can recognize where I'm just seeing this bond between all 3 of them, this whole group, and seeing it form and develop and turn into something great. Before, it seemed like Nanachi was almost just tagging along for the kicks, like she didn't really need a reason to be there. But now it feels like she is just a group member, like she cares about these 2 people and she wants to be with them and protect them. So that's why, even though this chapter was a bit slower, I'm okay with it being slower. I think it's necessary in order to establish that this is a team, this is a group that cares about each other. And there's this wonderful section of Nanachi's thoughts where she's just thinking to herself after that whole scene with Riko encouraging her, where she's just like, damn it, this is the adventure to the bottom that I have always wanted. I'm actually having fun. And then there's just one last little damn before time passes and we move on to the next scene. And I just love that so much. It's such good characterization without just blatantly saying, oh, I care about you guys. Like, this is such a good way of showing Nanachi's thoughts that she's on the adventure she had always wanted, and she's with people who care about her. At the very end of the chapter, we finally arrive at Ido Front. I think that's how you pronounce it, or Ido Front, the forward operating base, the lair of Bondrewd himself, and what we have learned as the only entrance into the 6th layer. That is the only way we're making it down there. So we're going to have to go on some sort of infiltration to get around Bondrewd and make it to the 6th layer. Although Nanachi even says an encounter with him is incredibly likely. And I just have to say, this is just another piece of gorgeous artwork. I almost like this more than the shot of the Sea of Corpses. Just the base looks so cool. Reminds me of something like Star Wars, like maybe Cloud City or something. And from what I can tell, it looks like it's stationed on top of this foundation, and it looks like that is the central chasm that it's resting on, and that's why it's the only way to make it into the 6th layer. We also learned that it's slowly spinning, and I wonder what the reasoning for that is. Like, how does that help the base? I'm sure we'll get all of these answers in due time, but like, I'm just so fascinated with this structure. I also wondered how Bondrewd was able to build it here in the first place, and we're told that it was actually an abandoned or ruined ritual site that was already here. And that just leads me to speculate even further. What was a ritual site doing here in the 5th layer in the first place? We make it to the only entrance we can to enter this base, and as we reach the entrance, we are greeted by someone we've never seen before, a new character, and we don't really know anything about her. She only says one line. She says, "Are you Papa's guests? Quite small, aren't you?" But through this, we can basically imply that this is Bondrewd's daughter, or at least somebody that she looks up to as a father. And that scares me, because as soon as I saw that, the best dad jokes just rung in my head, and I don't know what to think. I don't know where this is going, but I love her design. I love the way she looks, and I'm looking forward to seeing where they take this character. Are we meeting Bondrewd next chapter? That is the question. From what I've been told, Bondrewd's arc does start next chapter, so this is going to be a wild ride. I cannot wait. Thank you guys so much for your support. That's been all for this chapter review. It was, like I said, it was a slower chapter, but I still really enjoyed it. I love the dynamic and character interactions that we got in this chapter, and it's good setup for what will, from what I've been told, be an incredible arc. One question I did have before I cut off, I mentioned this in the reaction, I wanted to ask it here too. Or not really ask, but just let you guys know. If there are certain chapters in the future that you feel like are necessary, like must be experienced back to back, let me know. For example, the finale of Made in Abyss, that was 2 episodes, and I cannot imagine watching those 2 parts of the story separately. They fit so well together. So if there's 2 chapters later on in the story that you feel like should be experienced back to back, let me know. I imagine the last 2 chapters of the arc would be a cool thing to experience back to back, but I don't know. So just inform me on that, what you think about that, and try not to abuse it. Don't say like, oh, just do every 2 chapters from now on. Like, I'm going to keep it single chapter reviews, but tell me if there's 2 chapters that are cooler and should be experienced as one huge thing. That's been all from me. Thank you guys again for watching. Thank you for the support. Thank you for commenting and talking with me on every single video. It means a lot. Stay tuned this Saturday for my Hosoge no Kuni episode 4 review and Ancient Magus' Bride episode 4 review. That's going to be fun, although I will have to cut into my Odyssey time a little bit, so it hurts me, but I'm doing this for you guys. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and as always, have a good day.